What's going on? Welcome in. So as we all know, yesterday the Jets went out and traded wide receiver Mecole Hardman and a 2025 7th round pick back to the Kansas City Chiefs in exchange for a 2025 6th rounder. So in other words, just a pick swap, a future late round pick swap. Obviously it's not ideal, and there's a bunch of different ideas, right? Xavier Gipson maybe leapfrogging him on the depth chart. Did something happen with Mecole Hardman, in the locker room throughout time with the Jets? Was Hardman a Joe Douglas guy, and he's just not really gelling with Hackett and his system? A lot of different question marks out there, but the fact is he's no longer a Jet, and we have to move on. And, really since that trade, I've seen a lot of comments and, people suggesting, well, hold on a second. We got the trade deadline coming up here in a couple weeks. The Jets are 3-3. We're in the bye week right now. Could this open up a move for Joe Douglas and the Jets to add another wide receiver? Now, specifically, personally for me, I'm targeting O-line. I think we cannot have enough tackles right now, whether it's through a trade, whether it's, even signing a Lyle Collins. I'm totally down for that. I think maybe adding an interior offensive lineman would also help, just for, depth purposes. We don't know how long Tippmann is going to be out for. Schweitzer early on, he's even, our backup. Our depth has battled injuries too. So, ideally, I'm trying to address the offensive line, but in this video, I wanted to really focus in on some of the wide receivers. Some I feel like are more realistic than others, but I wanted to just throw a bunch of names out and, not necessarily saying that the Jets should go out and make a move for all these guys or every single one I'm pounding on the table for. I wanted to focus in on some of the players that could realistically be moved by their teams, whether it's, a selling circumstance, right, where the team is just blowing it up and they just have to move pieces, or maybe it's just not the right fit. So the first wide receiver I feel like we should kind of talk about here, flying a little bit under the radar, but it's Adam Thielen from the Carolina Panthers. Adam Thielen is having a fantastic season, right? 49 receptions, almost 50 catches. Through 6 weeks, the NFL season is wild in and of itself, but 49 catches, 509 receiving yards with 4 touchdowns. We look at Carolina right now, and they're 0-6. There's obviously they traded DJ Moore. They traded their future first round pick next season to go up and select Bryce Young, and it just hasn't really. I feel like one game the defense will look a little bit better, but the offense won't pick it up. And then, another game it would be the reverse situation. But the bottom line is the Carolina Panthers are 0-6 right now. Granted, they play in a division that is seemingly wide open with the Saints, Falcons, and Bucks. But I would say right now, if the Panthers want to start accumulating draft picks, right, just not necessarily punting on the season, but if they're in a position where they're like, okay, we can move on from a veteran 33-year-old wide receiver in Adam Thielen, who was just brought to the team this offseason, and flip him for maybe a mid-round pick or something like that, I could see Carolina wanting to explore something along those lines, right? Now, there is a reverse way of thinking, which is, well, we need to develop Bryce Young. We need to make sure that he has enough playmakers on the outside. We need to make sure that he has enough help and protection up front. And those two things have been a concern. And crazy enough, I've actually seen a report, I think it was a week and a half ago, suggesting that the Panthers could be buyers at the trade deadline, wanting to add a wide receiver. So we'll see what happens there. Because if you go down that way of thinking, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, they're not going to trade Thielen, but again, it's not like the deadline's today or tomorrow. It's in 2 weeks. What happens if the Panthers are 1-8 or 0-8 or 1-7? Maybe there could be a change of heart within the Panther Panther organization. So I think if I was a Panther fan, I would ideally want to move off of Thielen and just recoup a nice mid-round pick. It kind of reminds me of like a baseball, like an MLB trade where, for example, you'd have the Oakland A's sign a veteran player, and the hope is, okay, he looks really solid in the first half of the season, right up until the trade deadline, then we can flip him and get some prospects back in return. So maybe Adam Thielen is somebody that the Jets can explore. Moving on to the 1-win Denver Broncos, they have 2 wide receivers here to talk about. Number 1, Courtland Sutton, obviously a guy who has been, totally impressive when healthy. When he's on the field, This guy, jump balls, 50-50 balls, red zone threat, huge catch radius. At times, he has looked really, really good. Like, you just love the upside with Courtland Sutton. The problem is with Courtland, I feel like it would cost the Jets a lot to go out and get him, despite the Broncos only having one win, despite the recent reports of Denver potentially wanting to blow it up, sell the team, or sell like the veteran pieces. I feel like Courtland Sutton, despite that stuff, will still go for a lot. I don't see a situation where Denver's like, we'll take whatever for him. The other receiver, Jerry Jeudy, a little bit of a different situation, but I think if you add Courtland, and of course, you do have the argument with Sutton, despite him being really, really good, and of course he would come in and be a huge boost to this, to this Jets offense. Some could say, well, hold on, he might have a similar skill set to an Allen Lazard. We already have the two outside guys pretty much locked down with Allen Lazard and Garrett Wilson. Personally, I'm not using that as an argument against Courtland Sutton. I'm simply saying, it is a fair argument to say, hey, well, hold on, what's the role of Sutton going to be here? If we're going to give up a lot to go get him and take on, quite a bit of money, we better have a plan in place. I don't want to see another Mecole Hardman situation, because this is not, the player, the trade to kind of do that with. Because again, with Sutton, you have to factor in the injuries, you have to factor in the money that he's getting paid, which I believe is right now, I think like $13 or $14 million per season. So I actually just pulled up the contract because the 14 mil didn't sound right to me. It's actually an $18.2 million cap hit for this season. Obviously, there's been, time has passed here, so it's not like the Jets would take on that full 18.2. But there's 2 years remaining left on Courtland Sutton's deal, where he's a $17.3 million cap hit next season, and then a $17.8 million cap hit in 2025. And then he's an unrestricted free agent in 2026. But there is a potential out in 2024 with a $7.6 million dead cap hit. Okay, so the next receiver here is Sutton's teammate, Jerry Jeudy. And this is one of the more interesting, at least for me personally, one of the more interesting case studies in football, right? Specifically at wideout, because I looked at Jerry Jeudy coming out of Alabama, just like he had a lot of things that I really, really liked about his game. I remember at the time, thinking back, to that draft class. Obviously, the Jets went with Becton, but I was in the mindset if we end up with Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb, I am totally fine. Those were actually the two guys that I was really hoping for, right? I just wanted Adam Gase in this Jets offense to give Sam Darnold a true weapon. CeeDee Lamb obviously pops off, but with Jerry Jeudy, it just hasn't really worked in Denver so far. He's missed some time. The numbers aren't really there. But the reason why it's super interesting is because despite Jerry Jeudy being in the league for multiple years here, this dude is only 24 years old. 24 years old. For perspective, Allen Lazard is 27 and Garrett Wilson is 23. So Jerry Jeudy is 1 year older than Garrett Wilson, but you feel like he's just been around for such a long time. And Garrett's like this, this new young wide receiver that just hit the league. That's a fact. But with Jerry here, of course you ask the question, why isn't, because the production does not mirror where he was drafted, right, whatsoever. And quite frankly, again, I liked what he showed at Alabama, route running ability, football in his hands, yards after catch. I really was a big fan of him. I will say this though, why it could make a little bit more sense for the Jets to make a move is because we look at the Jets offensive coordinator. It's Nathaniel Hackett. And we asked the question, when was Jerry Jeudy's best season? It was last year, where he had career highs in catches, yards, and touchdowns. In 15 games with Hackett, Jeudy had 67 receptions, 6 touchdowns, 972 receiving yards. And if we also think back to that offensive staff, Zach Azzani was on that Broncos coaching staff as well. He's now the Jets wide receiving coach. So if you are a Jerry Jeudy, he's coming into a Jet locker room, again, in this hypothetical situation, where he knows the system, he knows Nathaniel Hackett, he knows how he is as a play caller, and then from a positional grouping standpoint, he knows the wide receiving coach. And what makes the cherry on top, that was his best season of his career. So maybe there is that potential, hold on, Jerry Jeudy might, in the eyes of some, might be, overrated or overdrafted or whatever the case may be. But when he worked with, like, in Hackett's eyes, I know how to use him. I know how to put him in a position to have success. I don't necessarily view Jerry Jeudy as like a number one option or, even like a steady number two, but I feel like potentially he could have a role within the team. And again, with Jeudy compared to Sutton, I don't think the trade compensation I don't think it would be as high. I feel like it would cost more to go get Cortland. Now there's been a lot of teams linked to Jerry so far throughout the process. Specifically the Indianapolis Colts. That's the team I keep seeing over and over again. So we'll see what happens there. But moving on, we can talk about Hunter Renfrow, slot receiver from the Raiders. This season and last season, didn't really have too much production, but the year prior, he had over 1,000 receiving yards. Tough player, comes up big in the red zone, comes up big on third and mediums and whatnot. He could potentially be a security blanket for Zach. And Hunter Renfrow right now strikes me as the player that will not be moved for a lot. I don't see a situation where the Raiders are like, we want a 3rd-round pick for him. We want a 4th-round pick for him. They just don't use him. It's kind of similar to the Mecole Hardman situation, but it's like, what's his plan within the offense? Does he have is he a long-term fit with the Raiders? The answer is no, probably not. The Jets have a player here in Carl Lawson who they can move over to Las Vegas, who would fit one of, he would essentially check one of the Raiders' boxes that they're looking for in the trade deadline process here, which is adding another pass rusher. Obviously, the Chandler Jones situation caught a lot of people off guard. He's no longer with the team. So there has been the report suggesting that the Raiders are looking for that potentially like an opposing pass rusher to Max Crosby. So you have 2 guys attacking the quarterback from both sides, despite them drafting, Tyree Wilson in the top 10. But I think that could be really, really interesting, right? Lawson going to the Raiders, Renfrow going to the Jets. I don't think Renfrow would take this offense over the top, but I feel pretty comfortable with Hunter Renfrow working in the slot over Randall Cobb. I think he would just provide more explosiveness. I think he would provide better hands as well. Just, I know it sounds simple, but I think that would be the case. And also with Renfrow, you have him under contract for this season and next year. So if you're projecting, you have your 2 outside guys already locked up, Garrett Wilson and Lazard, and then you already have Renfrow. So your top 3 wide receivers are already under contract going into next season with the assumption that it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. So I think that could be a potential draw. And then Hollywood Brown, I think, now comes into play because the Jets don't have a deep threat on the roster. We don't really have a lot of speed at the wide receiver position. And Marquise Brown comes in and checks both of those boxes, right, immediately. I think, watching how the Jets have called their offense these past couple of weeks with a lot of play action, Breece Hall getting involved, and, of course, just knowing Zach Wilson's arm strength and whatnot, I think. And I'm going to keep on saying it. I hope I don't sound super annoying here, but I really want the Jets to push the ball down the field a little bit, take a couple of deep shots. And, I understand right now it might be difficult because we don't have the personnel and Hardman didn't work out for whatever reason. But I think, if you just compare Hollywood Brown to Mecole Hardman, similar styles of players, but Hollywood's the better receiver. Hollywood is the better receiver. So if you add him to this Jets lineup, all of a sudden, man, we can be looking at some pop offensively. Because whenever he's in the lineup, you have to account, where's Hollywood Brown at? Because he could take the top off the defense. You could send him on a reverse. He's really, really explosive. The issue with Brown, number one, he's going to have a lot of teams interested. There's already been a bunch of teams that have been linked to potentially acquiring Brown. And number two, he's on an expiring contract, and I believe he's owed, just over $13 million. So I think the price tag for Hollywood Brown would be significantly higher than maybe some of the other guys that we've talked about so far, especially if there's 3 or 4 teams bidding for Hollywood services. Because Arizona right now, they're trying to, establish the culture. They're playing hard for Gannon. Ideally, you would want to, continue to add draft picks to the pool, and try to move forward from there. The last receiver here on the list, Darnell Mooney. Now, this one's a bit weird to talk about because, Chicago, I'm rooting for Justin Fields. I hope he, remains as the starting quarterback for the Bears. But as of right now, it just seems like Eberflus it just seems like the writing is on the wall. And at some point, the Bears are going to start over again. Darnell Mooney's an interesting option. I think he would be a really nice complement to Alan Lazard and Garrett Wilson. I don't know how much the Bears would be asking for in a potential, Mooney acquisition here. But at the end of the day, he would be a boost. I do think he would come in and be an upgrade. And I have seen his name pop up a little bit more as the Bears, continue to just spiral here. So anyway, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Which wide receiver are you looking at? Are you even looking at wide receivers, or are you more so focused on offensive line? Again, personally, I'm really trying to focus in on O-line, but I definitely wanted to cover at least some of the bigger name wide receivers that could be moved, and I could maybe see Joe Douglas in. Hold on, let's just pick up the phone and just see where things stand. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts, and as always, go Jets.